Okay, should we get started? Perfect. Welcome everyone. My name is Oak. I'm from Solstice Storytelling, and I assume you're all here for the really boring stories with mathematical and grammar undertones. Yeah? Yeah. Oh, Alicia is. Nice. Unfortunately, you're in the wrong session because I don't know any stories about that. So, my first story that I have for all of you is an old folk story, and it's about a monster who turns people into cake. So, with a nod or a shake, does anyone know any stories about monsters who turn people into cake? No one knows. So, this is a folk tale from the lands of Essex. So, over in the lands of Essex, there is a place called Saffron Walden. And this place was very famous because one day, even though everyone was growing all their food and have fruit trees and nice things growing in their gardens, all different flowers, the mayor of Saffron Walden said, I'm creating a new law that instead of vegetables or fruit or any other flowers, even grass, every single person in Saffron Walden now needs to grow crocuses. Crocuses, said the people of the village. Why on earth should we grow crocuses? Now, in the middle of a crocus, this is where you get what is known as saffron, which is a very expensive thing that you can buy for like over £5 in one of those tiny jars in the supermarket. But back in those days, people would take it to markets. And in this way, when everyone grew crocuses and harvested all of the saffron, the town became very, very rich. And the mayor was very pleased. But there was one problem. Does anybody know who is attracted to saffron because it is the only thing that it eats? If you could unmute, please, Amber. Does anybody know what eats only saffron?
She's asked a question.
She's asked a question. Do you know? Spiders? No, it wasn't spiders. Any other suggestions?
Orange flies.
Wasn't flies. It was, in fact, a cockatrice. Now, has anyone ever seen a cockatrice? Well, you wouldn't have done, and I'd be very worried if you had, because they are very strange monsters that are very rarely seen, and they look like absolutely ginormous, scaly, leathery chickens. They're very strange. And they are covered in scales instead of feathers, and they've got huge beaks. Probably if you put your arms out and make them into a bit of a triangle, that's how big its beak was. Yeah, you've got it. And it would come to the town, and it started to terrorize people, to be honest. It would go along and try and get all of the saffron. And people were very scared, because it's not often you get a big scaly chicken really terrorizing your town. And they didn't know what to do. And they thought the only way forward is to defeat this monster, to defeat the cockatrice. And so they tried to find the 3 bravest people in the town of Saffron Walden. And they found 3 men that were knights. And they thought, right, they've got swords, they've got shields, they'll do the job. But unfortunately, these 3 knights were quite lazy, and they didn't spend any of their time practicing. They didn't really know how to hold a sword, but they liked to wave it around and look quite fancy. And their armour was all quite rusty and a bit stained with tea and coffee. They would drink it in to look a bit fancy. But the village gathered those 3 knights together and sent them off. Well, They found the cockatrice easy enough. It was out in the fields of Saffron Walden, pecking away at the saffron in the crocuses. And the first knight went up to it and shook his sword, which was quite heavy and his arm ached quite quickly. And he said, "You, cockatrice, I will defeat you." And the cockatrice turned around and looked at the knight. And as soon as its eyes were set on the knight, he turned into a lightly spiced sponge cake. Well, it was completely bizarre. The other two knights had never seen anything like this. And so, the second knight thought, "Ooh, that's a bit weird." But what do you think he did? What do you think the second knight did next? Any ideas? Shout them out, don't be shy, or I'll make them up and they'll be even weirder than what you might suggest.
Took a slice of cake.
Took a slice of cake, it's a good suggestion. Any others?
Hopped on one leg.
He hopped on one leg, that's an interesting suggestion. Do you know what, I'm going to combine the two. He hopped on one leg over to the first knight and took a bite. And it was really rather nice. And the cockatrice, who'd seen one knight come, turned him into cake, and his friend came along and went to eat him, thought, "Dear Lord, it's doing everyone a favour, I'm going to turn him into lightly spiced sponge cake too." And so it did. And the third knight ran away, because he wasn't really having any of it, to be honest. And off he went, and the village didn't know what to do. They now had their two bravest knights, the strongest men in their village, were now sponge cake. And the children kept eating it, even though they were told not to. They were even taking bowls of frosting with them. And so they thought long and hard. And they said, "We need someone even braver than these three men to come and defeat the cockatrice. It's eaten nearly all of the saffron." Well, one person came out who had looked after their armour, who knew how to use a sword, and who knew how to use the shiniest shield the town had ever seen. And she was a 15-year-old girl. And she hadn't had time for all of the silliness that the boys had been up to. She'd been training hard with her sword and her shield. She had really good polished armour. And she said, "I will take on the cockatrice." If you just joined us, a cockatrice is a scaly, massive chicken. Just go with it. And now, she said, "I will take on the cockatrice." And the villagers thought, "Well, we don't really have anything to lose, you know, do your best." And so she went out in her shiny armour, with her sword and her shield, and she walked towards the cockatrice that was eating the saffron as usual. And the cockatrice turned. But just before the cockatrice laid his eyes on her, she lifted her shield, which was polished so well it looked like a mirror. And what do you think happened?
The chicken got turned into cake.
It did! The cockatrice was turned into lightly spiced sponge cake. And all of the village celebrated, and they all had a lovely slice of cake. And, you know, nobody really thought about the fact that it had been the cockatrice. And the village celebrated, and Saffron Walden was known throughout the lands for its famous saffron, and to this day is still known as such. The end. Okay, now my next story, I like that people unmuted themselves like you said, that was enjoyable, thank you. My next story, if you so wish to hear another one, is of a rather different ilk. And this story is brand new, and I have never told it to an audience before. This story is called The Clockwork Girl. Now, once upon a time, there was a very clever inventor and engineer who had learned the trade since very young age and had a laboratory completely full of all machinery and electronics and steam power and clockwork, the most that you could imagine. And what do you think we should call this engineer? I need some suggestions because it's quite a new story.
Thomas.
Thomas? Bruno? Nice, see what you did there. Well, as a matter of fact, none of you have guessed that this engineer was a lady. And so, let's give her a lady's name. Can I have a lady's name, please? I can see a lot of discussion going on in one of the windows, but you're muted. So we're going to go with go.
Rose.
Rose. I like the name Rose. That's good.
Yeah.
Erica. My mum says Erica, so we'll go Rose Erica. Well, Rose Erica. That's lovely. Rose Erica was so clever that she had built up her little empire of engineering and inventing and knew all the ways of the Victorian engineering world. But even though she had made her fortune in this and had a lovely house, had really nice things, all of the stuff that she could dream of, she didn't have the one thing that she had always wanted. And that thing was a daughter. She had always wanted a little girl. And her friends who had grown up with her, they'd often met people and had a daughter or a son themselves, but she hadn't had time for any of that business. She was too busy inventing things, which is fair enough. And Rose Erica got quite old. She had long white hair and her bones were creaking a bit more than usual. And she thought, if I'm going to have a daughter, I need to have one soon, really, because otherwise I'm going to be too old to look after her. And I think it's time. And so that evening, she set about in her laboratory and she started to build a little girl. She used clockwork, she used steam power, she used pistons, she used sheet metal and soft leather to wrap around and make skin, and she wired it all together, and eventually there was a little girl. And only one piece was left to put in. And Rose Erica knew that this couldn't be made of machinery. This had to be a human heart. And so, as was the time in Victorian London, for that is where she was, she went to a rather questionable establishment and found herself a human heart. And she took it home, and that evening, with her tweezers and her wires, she put the human heart in the chest of the clockwork girl. And she wired it all in perfectly, and she sewed up the last bit of skin. And she stood back and she looked at this little girl that she had made. And the hinged eyelids opened and clockwork eyes blinked. And she held out her hand and she said, "Hello, Mother." And as she moved her arm, it was a bit of a tick-tock noise. Tick-tock, tick-tock. And Rose Erica was very pleased. She had made her daughter one she had wanted all this time. Well, she thought, now finally, I have someone to love me. I will love my little girl and she will love me. But Rose Erica noticed a small problem with her little girl. That although her arms were all moving correctly and her hands were all moving correctly, the heart wasn't beating. She thought. And that evening, she sat over her drawings with her clockwork daughter in the corner because she didn't need any sleep. And she looked at them all, and she had done them all right. You know, she'd done all the wiring correctly. Not that she had any doubt, for she was very clever. But she knew that if the heart didn't beat, then her clockwork daughter couldn't love. And she wanted her daughter to be able to love her. Thought Rose Erica. What a conundrum. So the next day, she took her daughter to a few of her friends who were excellent engineers as well and inventors, and they looked over all the design drawings and they couldn't find anything wrong. But one of her friends, who was very knowledgeable in the field of clockwork people, which was quite a field in the time of Victorian London, this friend said, well, the problem is that in order to get a heart to beat, you have to trigger it. You have to give it something that it loves. Ah, said Rose Erica. I need to find something that my clockwork daughter loves. And so she thought, okay. She gave her daughter a hug. She gave her a kiss on the cheek. Nothing. She went out and she bought her, I don't know, what do you think a little girl would like to be bought?
A unicorn.
A unicorn. She even invented a tiny miniature unicorn that would like trot along the desk, but nothing. What else? One more suggestion.
A dinosaur.
A dinosaur. So she made an exact replica of a pterodactyl and, you know, got it to fly in front of her daughter. And she smiled, but her heart didn't beat. Thought Rose Erica. Okay, well, maybe buying my daughter stuff isn't the way to go. And she loved her new clockwork daughter so much that she thought, well, I don't need her to love me. I just want her to love something so that she can experience love. So she thought long and hard about what or who a little girl could love. And so she invited various people around. There are some suggestions of people that a little girl might love. None. No one knows anything. Any suggestions? Fairies.
A ballet dancer.
Ballet dancers. Nice. So she invited round the world-class ballerina, the prima ballerina, and she paid her to dance around the room. And the clockwork girl, you know, she smiled and she clapped very politely, but her heart wasn't beating. I know, it was terrible. And she even bought the best fairy paraphernalia that anyone could ever have witnessed, but her clockwork daughter's heart didn't. Well, after weeks and weeks of Rose Erica trying and trying and trying and trying to find something that her daughter would love, she had not been successful. And she closed her notebook and she thought, fine, do you know what? Maybe my clockwork daughter won't love anything. And that's okay, because I love her anyway. And I'll just try and make sure that she's safe. And so that weekend she thought, after all this work, I need a bit of a holiday, to be honest. And so she packed their trunks and she took her clockwork daughter on the train out into the countryside. And they got off the train and there was beautiful fields all around. and the birds were singing and the sun was shining. And as soon as they got off of the train into the lane of the little village where they were staying, they saw a little picket gate, one of the ones they use on postcards. And they went through and they were in a beautiful field. And Rose Erica took her clockwork daughter's hand and they walked into the field. And there in the middle was a great ancient tree. It was one of those ones with twisted bark and the branches all going everywhere up into the sky. And you could see the roots going down deep. And there was grass all emerald green around it. And birds were sat all in the branches. And all of the leaves were fluttering in the sunshine. And a squirrel darted up the trunk. And it was the most beautiful thing that Rose Erica had ever seen. But something strange was happening. She felt a very odd feeling. Her daughter's hand that she was holding was starting to pulse, like oil or steam was being pumped somehow into her daughter's hand. What do you think was happening?
Her heart is working.
Her heart was working. She looked at her clockwork daughter, and there, ba-bum, ba-bum, ba-bum. And she saw on her face the biggest smile that she had ever seen her daughter give. Could you all give me your best, biggest smiles, as if you've just fallen in love with a tree for the first time? Both feeling very dubious about the tree. Well, she was absolutely delighted. And as she looked at the tree, a little tear of oil came down. She was so moved by this tree, and she turned her head with a little of steam, and she said, "Mother, I love this tree." And her mother was delighted, and she said, "This is what I wanted to gift you. This feeling you have in your heart, this is love, and this is what I feel for you." And from that day forwards, Rose Erica and her clockwork daughter lived happily ever after and loved each other very much. And the clockwork girl's heart never stopped beating. The end. So we have time for one more story. So you have a choice. Oh,
Marvellous storyteller Oak. Can the story be even louder, since it's our last story?
let me see if I can move this a bit closer. Okay, is that any better?
Yeah, that's better. Yeah.
Okay. I will shout the story. Okay, so you have a choice for this last story. Would you like to hear a story about a very cheeky leprechaun, number one? Or would you like to hear a story about a rather grumpy boggart, which is story 2?
Story 2.
2.
2.
Number 2.
Nobody wants that.
Number 4.
Number 4. Okay, so this story starts with a farmer. And this farmer had a lovely piece of land that was very nice indeed. And on this piece of land, he could grow enough food for about half the year for him and his family. And he was quite pleased with this, but there wasn't really enough food to sell so that they could buy food for the other half of the year when it was winter. But very gradually, over a few years, the farmer managed to save up a little bit of money. And he was very pleased indeed when one day the piece of land next to his came up for sale. And he rushed straight to the town hall and he bought it. And he was absolutely delighted. He thought, finally, I have enough land that I can grow food all year round. And we will never be hungry. And we will even have enough food to spare. So I can sell some, I can get some nice shirts, or whatever it is farmers like, I don't know. A really nice new cow. And he was very pleased. And he went straight from the town hall with his lovely deed of ownership. And he went to have a look, a really good look at his land. Now, when he got there, he saw, you know, the lovely rolling field that his new piece of land was on. And he thought, oh, the soil's really fertile. It's, you know, in a really sunny spot. Perfect. And he walked down the field towards what looked like a little stream, maybe, at the bottom. And as he got nearer, he heard a stomping noise. Could you all do some really good stomping, please? Very much like that. And out of the reeds by the river came a very grumpy looking boggart. Has anyone ever met a boggart? I've never met one in person, but I've heard of a lot of people who've met them. Well, this boggart, he had very grey skin that was quite leathery and looked like it would be a bit weird to touch. And he had quite long ears coming up the top of his head. They were all hairy. And he was quite short and he had really long fingers. And he pointed one of these long fingers at the farmer. He said, "You! Get off my land. Off you go." And the farmer said, "Excuse me, this is my land. I think you'll find. I've even got the deeds. I've just been to the town hall and this piece of land is mine. But don't worry, there must have been some confusion. Off you go." And the boggart said, "I don't care what your piece of paper says. This is my land. I'm the boggart of this river and all of the land that touches the river is mine." He was really rather rude about it. And the farmer said, okay, look, because he knew that boggarts can be very, very tricksy. And you really don't want to get on the wrong side of a boggart. They can make your life quite difficult. And he said, okay. How about we share this land? You can have half the field and I'll have the other half. And the boggart thought about it. And he thought, okay, well, sounds like a kind of a fair deal. And he said, okay, so what are you going to do with this land? And the farmer said, well, I'm going to grow crops. And actually, I'm just looking to see when to sow the crops. Ah, said the boggart. Well, in that case, he said very rudely, pointing his finger right in the man's face, you know, almost touching his nose. He was a bit worried he was going to pick his nose, to be honest, but he didn't. He pointed his finger and said, I want the top half of the crop and you can have the bottom. Okay, said the farmer. And the boggart, with that, jumped back into the reeds and he said from the reeds, I'll see you at harvest time. Not so much as a goodbye or a wave. He was off. Well, the farmer was very displeased because he just spent all this money on this lovely piece of land. And now he had to give all the top half of his crop to the boggart. And he only got the bottom half. He went home. And as he was thinking on the way home, he thought, I know what I'll do. I will plant potatoes. And so he sowed all of his potatoes and they grew really well, which he knew they would because the land was very good quality. And harvest time came and the farmer arrived at the field and the boggart arrived with his scythe. And the boggart said, remember, the top half is mine. And the farmer says, I haven't forgotten. Well, the boggart was very, very displeased. he only had leaves and stems that he couldn't use at all. Said the boggart. You have tricked me, he said to the farmer. No, I haven't, said the farmer. You didn't tell me what I could plant. I planted my crop and you've got the top half fair and square. I've got the bottom half. Well, next time, said the boggart, I will have the bottom half and you will have the top half. Okay, said the farmer. And he took all of his potatoes and was very pleased with himself. And what do you think he planted next?
Carrots.
Carrots are still.
Wow, if he planted carrots, the boggart would get all the carrots because they grow in the ground.
Excellent.
Good idea.
A pear
Apple.
tree.
Oh, good suggestions. What he actually grew was maize. So that all of the corn was at the top. And he grew it, and it grew very well under the sunshine in this beautiful piece of land that was very fertile. And harvest time came, and the farmer arrived with his scythe, and the boggart arrived with his scythe, and the farmer got all of the maize, and the boggart just got the woody roots that were good for nothing. Ah, said the boggart, you have tricked me again. Right, do you know what? No more of this top and bottom malarkey. That's silly. This year, I will have the left half of the field and you will have the right half. Oh, said the farmer. He was in a bit of a pickle now. Okay, fine. Excellent. The boggart put his long fingers together in a very evil way. Could you all have a practice, please? Some evil finger thing. And the boggart jumped into the reeds, and the farmer went home. And he didn't know what to do now. He thought, well, doesn't matter what I grow, the boggart's going to get half. And so, what he did, he went to the pub, and he spoke to all the people in the village who were at the pub and asked what they thought he should do. And after a lot of discussion and scratching of heads and, thinking of beards, one woman in the corner said, I know what you should do. What you need to do is go to the blacksmith. And you need to ask from the blacksmith to have hundreds of very, very thin copper rods made. And what you need to do is plant every single copper rod next to the stem of the crop in the boggart's half of the field. Because then when he comes to harvest it, he's not going to be able to cut it down. She was very clever. And so the farmer sowed his seeds and he made a beautiful wheat field. And unbeknown to the boggart, he had ordered many, many copper rods, very, very thin, so you could barely see them. And on the boggart's half of the field, he put the rods by every single stem. Well, when harvest time came, the boggart arrived with his scythe, and he looked very pleased with himself. He thought, there's no way the farmer can wiggle out of this one and trick me this time. I've got my half fair and square. And the farmer arrived with his scythe at the ready. And the boggart said, remember, I've got the left side, you've got the right side. I know, said the farmer, fair and square. Well, the boggart took one swing of his scythe to cut down the wheat on his half and, he swung it again. He called over to the farmer. Very tough, this wheat that you've planted, very tough to cut. And every time he swung his scythe, it hardly cut anything. And he kept having to get his sharpening stone and sharpen his scythe. And then he'd go in again. And he'd have to sharpen it again. Well, the farmer was getting through his wheat very quickly. He was cutting it down in swathes. And he was about a quarter of the way through his half of the field already. Where do you get your scythe from? Said the boggart. I think I need one like yours. We can swap if you like, said the farmer. And they did. And the boggart swung the farmer's scythe and, ooh, it's really tough. I think you need to build some muscles, ooh, said the farmer, who was feeling a bit cheeky. Ooh. Just innocently carried on scything. Well, after an hour of this, the boggart, how do you think he was feeling?
Unhappy.
He was very
Exhausted.
exhausted, exactly.
Angry.
Angry.
Grumpy.
When you're really tired and really unhappy, a lot of people get quite angry. And he was very angry. He threw his scythe down. That's it! I don't want any piece of this rubbish land. You can have it. All I've got are leaves I can't eat, woody roots I can't eat, and now, even if I cut down this whole field, I can't get enough energy back that I'm using. It's rubbish. Take your land. I want none of it. And with that, he jumped back into the reeds with his own scythe, and the farmer never saw him again. Well, the farmer waited a few minutes, and he went over to the left side of the field and he unplanted all of the copper rods and put them away. And he harvested the whole field to himself. And from that day forward, the farmer had no trouble at all, and he could provide enough food for his family for the rest of their lives. The end. Perfect. Well, that is all we have time for.
Yeah, please.
So, any questions about any of the stories before we go? No?
Thank you so much, Oak. They were great stories.
You're really welcome. Thank you for coming to listen. And I hope you all enjoy the rest of Buddhafield online.
And if anybody wants to listen to those stories again, they're all on our Facebook page. Woohoo! And they are recorded and will go on YouTube too. And if you want to catch more of Oak's storytelling, I put a link in the chat, and that's on Facebook too.
Brilliant. Thank you everyone for coming. Have a lovely rest of your day.